All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. Today's white lightning is going to start out with Samo talking fitness stuff, because I had a thought from our previous talks where we've been talking about programming.
Well, and this is something anecdotally we can attest to right now because we both kind of put ourselves in the same situation. And it's actually one of the most important topics in exercise and fitness when it comes to long-term training, because it's the most overlooked principle of training. And we're going to talk a little bit of rest and recovery. Everybody thinks more is better. And I have to do this every day. I have to get up at 5 a.m. and do my boot camp every day, or else I'm going to fall behind. When you don't improve during the workout, you improve during the rest from the workout. And so we're going to talk a little bit of rest and recovery.
Well, I think a lot of people know kind of it's not quite accurate. And if you want to get witchcrafty and technical, you can, but people think of weight training as tearing your muscles and then the muscles rebuild themselves. And
there is a portion of that is correct.
And so if you think about that, then you should intuitively know, even if you don't know the technical details, that you need to give yourself time for that rebuilding to occur, right? So anecdotally, what Sam was talking about is we've been doing yard work, garden work, housework as kind of our warm-ups.
Project. Oh, well, just things around the house. I mean, can you see my wall I built? Okay. Yeah, so that there where there's a shoe rack, right there. There's a shoe rack right behind it is a pony wall with a gate installed on it. It looks a little, it's like it's shining bright with the sunlight, but
yeah, it is. But you can tell there's a barrier there to keep out the herd of dogs.
Yeah, well, the dogs are in with me right now but we at the front door they maul you as you're trying to come in, and I have clients come in the front door, some of them elderly, and the two pups push into them, and we're trying to keep them from running the neighborhood because they like to fight with other dogs. And also, just coming in with groceries, or Ben takes his bike to school, so he goes out that door. All of those little things, it's just going to help with that. So it at least gives a barrier. They may figure out they can jump over it one of these days. Well, I did figure out though, they have trouble because we have that fake wood floor. They can't get a running start because it's like they just run in place and they can't get a good push. So hopefully that helps. But other projects, our pool pump went out. For those of you looking to buy a house, don't buy a house with a pool. Just have a friend with a pool. It's like a boat. You just have a friend with a boat. A boat is a hole in the water you throw money into. A pool is water in the ground you throw money into. Our pool pump went out, and I was mad because that's the third time it's happened in the last year. And pool pumps are not cheap, but this time it's outside of the warranty. And I was playing with it myself, and I took it apart last night. And well, let's go back in time. About 3 months ago, Hamilton got into one of the cabinets and took out a box of Ziploc bags, sandwich baggies. And there was hundreds of sandwich baggies all over the yard. And for weeks, I was finding them in random places. Well, I found the last two. They had somehow gotten through the filters and were in the machinery of the pool pump. And it's burned out now, so we need a new one. But 2 sandwich baggies did it. But
hey, now you know.
My $1,000 piece of equipment, which I'm still going to play with and try to fix because I don't have $1,000 to fix it with. But maybe the good doctor will pony up. But frustrating. That dog has cost us. I had to rebuild a fence because of him. I had to make that pony wall because of him. Pool pumps out because of him. We're putting a dollar amount of about $7,000 or $8,000 this dog has cost me this year already. So
it was after you rescued him from being so malnourished, you thought he'd been hit by a car.
Well, but the main one was that the rocks we brought up last time. I think that's what did me in this time, because I thought I was having gastrointestinal issues. And it turns out I may have strained my pelvic floor.
Oof.
And I was thinking about it. I was on those rocks, dragging them out of the truck, and I was standing on the ever-growing pile, which was slippery and slick. So I was stabilizing with those inner hip muscles and that pelvic floor the whole time. And then about 2 days later, it hit me. I bet you I just am really sore in those stabilizers, and makes it hard to poop for those that don't know what all those muscles do. But I was like, let me try something. And I tried to do a Kegel exercise, and everything just like shot up my body, just crazy pain. I was like, I think it's my pelvic floor. I don't think it's my guts at all. But yeah. Tell us your story.
Well, I actually, to tie it more directly back into our topic, I have a trainee story. So I think I've mentioned him before, but most of my clients when I was working at the box gym were desk jockeys, and that's what I had to work on. Okay. But I had a couple of exceptions, and one of them was a pharmacist who not only was he a pharmacist, but he owned his own independent pharmacy. So he was a small business owner. So he worked stupidly long hours, as small business owners do, 10 to 14 hours a day on his feet. So he had the kind of the opposite problem, if you will, of most of the desk jockeys. So being constantly on his feet and looking down meant that his whole posterior chain was being engaged and, to some degree contorted. And you can't just throw someone like that into a posterior chain workout. He took more work to loosen those muscles up, warm those muscles up, and then more care in working those muscles, because all of that activity he was doing before he came into the gym counted. Just like your rock pulling and your fence building, that counted. And you need to keep that in mind when you then go into the gym.
Well, and ultimately you want to develop a state where you can do your daily activities and still train hard. That's where I was for the longest time until I hurt myself. And now I keep realizing, oh yeah, you were inactive for 6 months when it comes to that kind of stuff. So you want to develop, but the situation where you can work hard all day, but still train hard. And one of my philosophies in training is, everybody talks about soreness. They want to be sore. If I make you so sore that you can't go about your daily activities, then I actually had a negative calorie impact on you. If you decide not to walk up the stairs because your legs are dead, you've done less work that day.
And that's actually where this thought came to me, because my legs were so sore the other day when I had this thought, and I was trying to think through, all right, well, how do I work without, overworking these? I can't do nothing. So I'm like trying to think through. And then that's when I had the thought of this topic, because another thing you've said, another kind of truism of training, is that if you only work out on the days you're not sore, you'll never stop being sore. Especially when you're first starting and you have that just starting soreness that new people are going to experience, and especially people who aren't, used to athletic activity. It's going to kind of drag on them and keep them from wanting to train. But you do have to push through that sometimes, but you also don't want to push too hard through it. You don't want to ignore it. So there is a balance there of how you work through soreness versus don't overwork the soreness, if I'm making sense here.
Yes. Well, and there's the adaptation principle, right? So you have the stimulus, and then you have your curve where you have over compensation to that stimulus. And then you have where basically performance drops. You have to kind of go through those phases before you train again. Or if you keep hitting it in that super compensation period, yeah, you're going to have some initial results, but you're basically setting yourself to hurt yourself, and you're not going to have a long-term adaptation. Trying to think of what direction we're going to go with this. Rest and recovery is the most overlooked portion, as we talked about. People think more is better, but also when you're in the fitness world, people are just trying to lose fat, right? That's the main goal of 80% of Americans that lace up their shoes and go for a run, right? The problem is if you go too hard, too fast, you end up setting yourself back by having an injury or overtraining or something along those lines, or your cortisol levels are through the roof. So you end up storing fat. And so
bring up one of your programs that we've been looking at, because
okay.
we've been talking about the sets and reps and the periodization when we were talking about that part of the programming, and now let's look at it to look at the gaps in between.
Okay, let me find a good one. What kind of phase do you want? You want general prep, hypertrophy, strength?
Doesn't matter. Well, since we're talking generally, let's look at a general prep.
Okay. We'll go to local muscle endurance number 1. Day 1. Okay. All right. So this actually might be overcomplicated because this was developed over time. But we'll still talk to it. Share screen. Okay, so what we know, and this is okay. So let me put a disclaimer on this. 2 disclaimers. First of all, we're not giving you specific advice. You're not a client. You're not paying me. You're not in front of me. I don't know your situation. Consult a doctor before exercise. Blah 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 blah. Second disclaimer is well, shoot, I don't remember what the second disclaimer was. But okay, so this is so let's put some pins in some things. So we know. Oh, second disclaimer is I'm assuming everybody's a natural athlete or fitness enthusiast. Nobody's doing any gear, any kind of extra drugs to get through the process. So it is different. So if you open up your Muscle and Fitness and you see the bodybuilders program, guess what? It works for them because they're taking extra testosterone, taking extra stimulants to lose weight, etc. So this is assuming you're perfectly natural. You're doing everything through exercise and diet, not through extra chemical help. All right. So when we're talking rest and recovery, we also got to talk about how much you have to stimulate your body to get the best result. And what we're kind of the data shows is for us natural lifters, the way our testosterone peaks and the way the hormonal stimulus kind of comes out is you need to hit everything at least about twice a week to get the best results. And it doesn't have to be a week. And of course, there's a bell curve to that. With recovery, women tend to recover faster, but I actually think there's a little sneaky variable that people exclude in there, but that's another day. Women tend to handle higher volume and less recovery time. So wherever you are on the curve, you can figure it out. Maybe you can train every 3 days, and so that's a little less than a week. But at the same time, so I'm assuming so we're going to go by the general rule of twice a week for stimulus, and you're natural. So this is my basic local muscle endurance program. So local muscle endurance is increasing the volume you can do at the muscular level. So lactic acid tolerance, glycogen stores. So a good example, take a dumbbell, do as many curls as you can. Say it ends up 10 pounds, you can do 25 reps. If you're increasing local muscle endurance, then the next time you do it, maybe you can get 30 reps with that 10-pound dumbbell. So all of these physiological adaptations happen to build that up. So that's my first phase, because it's also great for developing tendon density, the fascial tissue around the muscle. Basically, this is the keep you from getting hurt when you train hard phase. And it's the first place I take people. So day 1, we're doing Romanian deadlifts, some push-ups, and this is a total body program. And you'll see kind of how the rest and recovery comes in. Romanian deadlifts, push-ups, and you see lat pulls, single arm press. So it's hip hinge, vertical pull, horizontal push, and some abs. All right. Day 2, we're going to complement that. Overhead press. So we got a vertical push. So the difference between doing a bench press motion and doing an overhead motion, right? Split squats. Now we got a lower body squat motion versus the hinge. And then a rowing motion for the pull instead of a pulling down. So we kind of complement day 1 with day 2. And again, this is a total, this is why I thought it was a little complicated for maybe this example. I'm going to bring up a hypertrophy program next. All right. But again, complement. So day 1 is Monday. We'll just assume. Day 2 is Tuesday. Well, day 3 is not till Thursday. We're going to take a day off in there. And so day 1, a day of rest for everything you worked in day 1, another day of rest for everything you worked in day 1, and then day 3, then day 4, and then 2 days of rest. Don't worry about day 5 and 6. That was for nothing there. That's just from my general template, because so you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time you write a program. But in general, you need a golden rule of about 48 hours to recover from moderate intensity exercise. Now, if you're going high intensity, like a powerlifting program, your nervous system takes a little longer to recover. So we're looking at about 72 hours to recover. Let me get a more basic program.
And so, well, I want to stay on here for just a second while you're looking.
I already had it queued up. Did it come up? Did it change?
It's working on it. So the point you were making is, so like your kind of get up at 5 a.m. and do boot camp every day example is you're doing high intensity every morning and you're not giving yourself time to recover, especially because a lot of those programs tend to just kind of do everything every time. Here, you're able to get up and train 2 days in a row because you're doing different movements each day. So that day 2 has already begun the rest and recovery period for what you did day 1.
Well, I guess let's go into the different aspects of rest and recovery. So you brought up muscle damage, right? Well, you need a certain amount of time for that damage to repair, and the more damage you do, the longer you need, right? So what I brought up, did it change?
Nope. I think your
let me
computer brain farted.
Let me reshare then. Hypertrophy. So hypertrophy is muscle gain. So this is the goal here. It's a moderate volume, moderately high intensity. And because of that, I usually switch to a lower body, upper body split because you need more recovery, right? So that first one, there was only so many reps you did in that hinge motion. There was only so many reps you did in that press motion. There was only so many reps you did in that pull down motion because you're doing everything in one day. So the volume is lower, the sets times reps, but also because it's higher rep, the intensity is lower. So your nervous system doesn't need as much recovery. The actual muscles themselves aren't as damaged, so they don't need as much recovery. So you're able to do what we call high frequency programs. So you can go day 1, day 2, maybe a little rest, day 3, day 4, maybe a little rest, and you can work the total body every day, but that's because the volume's lower. So now we're trying to actually build muscle, which you need that muscle damage. Now that's a different variable because it takes longer to recover. And the intensity is higher, so the nervous system needs longer to recover. So what I do is I switch my clients to a lower body, upper body split on that. And it says squat or deadlift. I kind of give my clients a choice because some like to start the week with the deadlifts, some like to start the week with the squats. I prefer to start the week with the deadlifts, but typically the ladies like to start the week with the squats.
I like to start with whatever is most difficult. So for me, that's the squat, because I've done so much posterior chain training because of my back that I've actually gotten to where I can do deadlifts very safely for me.
Well, and that's why that's actually reversed for me, because I can do deadlifts a lot better than squats. So I like to do them first because I can get that amazing workout out of the way on Monday. and it sets me up for success throughout the week.
Well,
So not only is it a
yeah.
mental confidence booster, but also because I'm not as good at squats, whatever you do on Monday, even though Thursday is the next day, you're going to kind of similar have that stimulus, you're still going to have a little lag in performance from whatever you did on Monday. So I get more bang for my buck out of deadlifts. And then I just do the best I can on the squats.
Yeah, I am in what we refer to as a special population. My example here is giving the exception to the rule, because we always talk about how there are always exceptions to the rule. If I have one bad rep of a squat, I can't do a squat movement for 2, 3, 4 days because of my gimpy knee. So that's why I always want to be as fresh as possible when I'm doing my squats.
Well, we have different considerations too, because yours is, well, for lack of a better term, your balance. So everything that needs to happen to stay stable in a squat is out of whack with yourself. As we go back to when I did the eval on Heath, you can see a full eval on his knees and back in a previous episode when we were actually together. I can't remember what the meme cover is, but his consideration is, and then you're also stiff. Where my problem with squats is my hips are loose enough that I actually bottom out, like too loose of shocks in a car where you bounce, right? And so I have trouble with the turnaround without bouncing, and that's not good for you because now you're bottoming out on your joint. So we have different considerations, but they both lead to having trouble with the squat. But okay, so either way, so this is all legs, squat or deadlift. And yes, I do include deadlift as a leg exercise, not as a back exercise. A lot of your bodybuilders will include it on their back day. But if you do it right and you push the floor instead of pull the weight, it's a leg exercise. Hamstrings and butt do the work. The upper body just is along for the ride.
It's secondary work is what I think of it as. Is yes, your back, your arms, your core, basically everything but your pecs are being engaged, but they're not working. Now, work is being done by the posterior chain of the legs.
Now, when I do a strength program, it's different. But for the hypertrophy, for the muscle damage, again, we're in the 8 to 10 rep range. I include it as a leg exercise. When I do strength, I include it as its own thing. It's not a leg exercise. It's not a back exercise. It's a total body experience when we do strength and deadlifts. Little work on the neck. Don't worry about these secondary exercises for now, because it's what we call program density, where I'm just doing useful things while you're resting that don't affect
active rest is another term you'll hear for this kind of thing, where instead of just standing around for 60 to 90 seconds, you're doing something, but it's not something that's taxing.
Well, and it allows you to fit a lot more in. These are all designed around an hour workout, because the industry set that for us before I was ever even training. An hour workout is what you pay for, right? Yep. So it allows me to get a lot done in that hour. So I don't have to spend 30 minutes after doing your legs to work on all the rehab stuff that we need to work on. So this neck clock is not going to affect your deadlift, but it's going to make you healthier. So we do that in that you can catch your breath while you're doing it. And foam roll tensor fascia latte, which is the front side of the hip, that actually not only is good for most people who have a seated job, but you're talking about a hip hinge movement, the deadlift, it will actually make you more loose to do the exercise that you're doing before. But we'll talk density in another one. But so don't worry about the secondary ones, except for when they're actually working the muscles. So this is all legs, squat or deadlift, weighted bridges. So this is set up where whatever you do here determines what you do here. Yeah. Some TKEs, that's terminal knee extension. So we're talking about leg extensions or hamstring curl, depending on what you did. And then I love leg circuits. Leg circuits are very efficient, and they have a lot of bang for their buck, because I can do lunges, I can do side lunges, I can work the hamstrings, and then a pistol squat to finish you off. and then give you a rest here that gives you about a minute and a half rest if you do both sides, and then some abs. Okay, so all legs, but then day 2 we don't hardly touch the legs except I stretch them out. So I'm not working your legs at all except for some stretches to loosen them up. Rest. We need that rest, but we can crush your upper body. Then again, Wednesday rest, active rest. If you want to do some cardio, go for a walk. I'm not talking sprints. I'm talking go for a walk or do your lawn or do some gardening or something along those lines. Don't do the mulch. The mulch, I lose someone at mulch every year. But yeah, so I'm not even touching the legs except to loosen them up from what I did the day before. Then we get a day of rest, day 3. Okay, now we do the other one. So I did deadlifts on a Monday. I'm going to do squats today. Because I did deadlifts, I did the front squats. I'm going to do the bridges today. And again, secondary stuff to actually loosen you up from what we did day 2. Some step ups, single leg RDLs, band walks. So now we crush the legs again. 3 days from when we did it the first time. And now we're going to give them a break again, all upper body. And then you have the weekend after that. So about twice a week, 48 to 72 hours of rest in between is about optimal. And then take into account what you're doing in your daily life on whether maybe you need to take a day off from workout or give yourself a little more rest before you go into the next one. Or like today, I have deadlifts on the schedule, but I have probably 2 more truck beds of rocks to unload this weekend and also sand as well. So I'm probably going to do a technique day on my deadlifts because deadlifts on the schedule. So I'm going to put some bands on the rack and work on pulling up and back versus bending over and grabbing the weight, just because I know I've got all that other work that's non-negotiable coming up. So I'm going to go ahead and pull back on the intensity and do a technique day today. So that way my pelvic floor that is hopefully recovering and my low back gets a little rest before I do all that manual labor. Anything else you want to add to that?
Well, just the general point here is if you're designing, if you feel, confident and comfortable in designing your own program, or if you're, finding a program on the interwebs, keep these things in mind to make sure that it is structured and segregated such that you're getting rest in between those points of work, which actually gave me a thought that I don't know if we've ever discussed before. So then, given all that we're talking about here, what are your thoughts then on the classic basic weightlifting 101 of 3 sets of 10 of like the same 4, 5, 6 exercises Monday, Wednesday, Friday? Because then you're hitting those things 3 times a week with only 1 day of rest in between.
Yeah, and you're talking about the regular DeLorme model, which is 3 by 10. I think it's 50%, 70%, or no, 50, 60, 70% or something like that, which actually has a lot of research behind it. So that's actually where we start a lot of our programming because, well, it might not be the best, but we know it works, right? And we can play with the programming to get better, but that's a good base to start with. And realistically, with a new client, it's kind of a good little test model to start with. It depends. You said 3 sets of 10, you said 6 exercises, right?
That's usually what I see when I see these types of workouts, is like the same 6 exercises at all 3 days.
It's not horrible because, again, what I told you, volume and intensity determine the rest, right? And so if you're doing 3 sets of 10 of one exercise, 48 hours later, you can come and hit that exact same exercise again, because you're not, when you have 10 reps, your intensity can only be so high. And because you only did 3 sets, the 30 reps at that weight, especially if you do the ramp up, like I said, the 50, 60, 70%, it's really not a whole lot of volume. So 48 hours later, you should be recovered. If you're not recovered in 48 hours, you got some issue with your either what you're doing during the rest and recovery or your body in general. So now we talk about nutrition and other factors. But yeah, 3 sets of 10, 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, same exercises. You can do that. You're gonna get bored quick, but
I wasn't even thinking about the technical roots of that, and I was trying to find an example real quick, and
well,
the
let's
internet
go
is even worse than it used to be. Well, no, but
let's go into the variables. So this will make more sense, I think. So you've got 3 different real major variables of why we need rest, right? You've got the actual energy recovery. So how much glycogen you have stored in your muscle versus how much you depleted. You have the muscle damage, and then you have the neurological fatigue. Okay, so those are the 3 major factors of recovery. So the energy, you can probably recover all the energy in the system within 24 hours if you have proper nutrition, especially if you start right after your workout. Most important meal of the day is not breakfast. Most important meal of the day is post-workout. So if you start with that, you can recover that glycogen in probably even less than 24 hours. So the energy, depending, if you do very little muscle damage and neurological fatigue, so your volume is relatively low and your intensity is relatively low, then you can do that every day. No, I don't want to overcomplicate this. Well, I was going to go into concentric versus eccentrics versus isometrics. No, so okay, so low volume, low intensity, you can do the same thing every day if it's those things. Okay, a good example, you can go for a walk every day and your legs aren't going to die, right? We've done PLP, right? So you remember what that is? Push up, lunge, pull up, where you try to add one every day. Start at an easy number and try to add one every day. Well, because you keep the volume and intensity low, you can do that every day up to a certain point until the volume becomes too high. And then because all it is muscle is energy recovery. You're not damaging the muscle, and the neurological system is only slightly improving every day. Now the muscle damage is the second phase. So now I went in with those 8 reps. 8 reps is high enough intensity, the weight is great enough to do muscle damage, and the volume is enough to do more muscle damage to more fibers, because the fibers will recruit in an order to get the most work done. So now I'm doing a lot of muscle damage, but the intensity is still not super high because I can do 10 reps with it. So it's 10 reps away from my 1 rep max. So we're looking at about 70 to 75% if I'm going balls out, right? So the intensity is still only moderate, but the muscle damage is high. Well, good thing soft tissue has a lot of blood flow and recovery is fast. You can come back after about 48 hours and you get that second day soreness, and then after that you're fine. So we can come in 3 days later and do another high volume workout on those muscles we attacked 3 days before. Now, neurologically, that's the last one. This is the one people forget because it's sneaky. You don't know. You go in and you bust out your 1 to 3 rep max deadlift. Your whole body is just exploded in this intensity. Your nervous system actually says, fuck you for like 3 or 4 days. And so if you're really high up there and you're really in tune with your body, maybe even a week. Like if I crush, 3 rep max deadlift, probably need to take a week off before I even touch a deadlift again, or even a hip hinge movement. So those are the different ones. Now for the natural lifters, I try to hit everything twice a week. So we do strength training, but we don't do it at a power lifter level. We just try to get a little bit stronger every time. So we increase the numbers for our general prep and our hypertrophy, and then we get stronger again, and then we go back to general prep with just a little bit more strength. And so we kind of build from there. But yeah, if you're going in there, I think the typical power lifter movement would be they'll crush their 5-3-1 on deadlifts, And then they'll do a technique day somewhere in between, but it's like 40-50% of what they can actually do. It's like picking up a box for us normal folk, you know. And then they'll come back a week later, or even a week and a half in some programs, and do that crushing it again, and then take that long neurological break in between. So you've got those three different things. So if you're only depleting energy, you can do that every day. If you're doing muscle damage, you need a couple days off in between each one. And then if you're doing extreme neurological work, you need the few days plus on top of that.
Well, I think that's a good place to wrap it up and actually tease what I was thinking about talking about next time we talk fitness, because you touched on the energy depletion. So we've kind of been talking the macro, the programming, how to program in recovery, you know, how to work in recovery in your whole program. But then during your workout, there's a recovery portion based on the energy types you are using. It's the best way I can think to put it in layman's terms, and you've got a good way to explain that. So next time
I've got a whole lecture on that, because
yeah.
that was my subject for the intern training program at Velocity. I was the bioenergetics lecturer. Yeah, that determines that first part that I talked about, because you have your creatine phosphate system, which is which we use every action we do. Everything we do is that's the first one to come out, because it's just energy right there. And it's kind of amazing when you talk about, you know, a lot of people bring up the religious talk here, but how fast these chemical processes happen in our body. I did that, you know, I had to deplete millions of chemical bonds in my body just to snap my fingers.
Yeah. So we'll get nerdy about, well, you'll get nerdy about it, and my eyes will glaze over depending on how much you talk about the biochemistry. We'll do that next time, and that will practically, that's going to kind of explain how you work in and figure out the small recovery phases in between sets and in between exercises. That's where that comes in, is with that. And if anything wasn't clear, or if there are some points you're not sure of, if you need help with practical examples, comment, and we'll try and get to it, and see if we can touch on things next time to make it a little more clear. Oh dear.
Yeah, this is my lecture right here. So I taught a PE class for San Jacinto College for a little bit, and they're supposed to just go in there and take some easy tests and do some workouts. And I was drawing chemical bonds on the board, and I snuck it into their tests.
You were the Dr. Wolf of San Jacinto College. We had our 6th grade social studies teacher was a doctor. He was a PhD historian that, for whatever reason, had decided to teach elementary school social studies.
Oh no, yeah, I would put these. They thought they were going to get out of class early every week, because that was their experience with the college level PE classes. And I was like, well, I got you for 3 hours, so we're going to do an hour and a half of lecture, and then we're going to work out for another hour and a half. It was an interesting experience, because there were some characters in those classes. I remember I took them outside. We were doing the anaerobic endurance, and I was like, well, shoot, I'll do the beep test, where you get you sprint, and then you get a 10-second rest, and you sprint back, and however long you can make the time, you keep going. It was a soccer test we did at Velocity. I was like, I'll make them do that. And it was night, so it was one of the late classes, and I see this little red light sprinting across the little area I was going. Dude was smoking a cigarette while he was doing the sprint test. And he was one of the last ones to survive, because once you can't make the time, you have to bow out. And he was in the top 3 in the class, and he's smoking a cigarette while he's sprinting back and forth across this area, this quad. And I'm like, God dog it, way to prove me wrong on some things. But we call that the exception to the rule.
Yeah, don't do that, people.
Don't do that. Yeah, don't smoke while you're sprinting. But yeah, it was also rewarding though, because yeah, they hated that I lectured for an hour and a half when they thought they were just going to work out for about 30 minutes and go home. But there was probably of the 300 or so people that I taught there were probably about 50 that had just a skewed idea of exercise and fitness, and realistically kind of turned their health life around that. And most of them were nursing students, because that's what kind of St. Jack is known for. And when you nurses tend to have very unhealthy lifestyles because of the stress involved with their job. You think, oh, they're in the health field, they're supposed to be healthy. No, you walk outside at a hospital, there's 50 nurses smoking, chain smoking out there on their break, and eating ding dongs and ho-hos, So it was really good to kind of see the transformation in these people. But yeah, it was, in their textbook, it was like, what's a carbohydrate? It's this 2 sentences long. And I'm like, no, we're gonna break this down chemically, and we're gonna talk about complex versus
You're a terrible human.
Insulin resistance. We're gonna, what the glycemic index actually means, and yeah, and they hated it. And then they loved it. The ones that loved it really loved it. The ones that hated it hated me. But maybe that's why I don't teach there anymore. Maybe I got a bunch of bad reviews. I remember the dean sat into one of the classes, because I guess she was supposed to monitor these things every once in a while, and it was a supplement lecture. And so I went through all of the ones that work, ones that don't, why, the science behind it. And she walked out of there, she's like, wow, I kind of didn't expect that. But yeah, it was a cool experience. And so that's what you'll get when we go into that kind of stuff. Is that it for rest and recovery? Do we do we want to recap? I think we simplified it in the end.
I think so.
Yeah. So if you do it, let me rant on the boot camp model real quick, because I think it brings it home. So this is why I hate the boot camp model. And I hated that when I was at Velocity, they called it the boot camp, because it really wasn't a boot camp.
Yeah.
The boot camp model is a temporary program by design. And just like real boot camp is.
Yeah.
Boot camp is a temporary program by design. It's made to weed out the people who don't belong. Now, when you bring that in the fitness industry, it's made to have really quick, fast results with no long-term goals in mind. And you go in, you're sitting on the couch, eating your chips, watching the Oscars, which is probably where we're going next. So you're sitting there eating your chips, watching all the shows that lead to the Oscars, and you gain 8 pounds, and you say, wow, I need to get in shape. I got out of breath walking up the stairs or whatever. And so you look online, you find XYZ boot camp, and you go out there, and for 4 to 6 weeks, you run around the park, do push-ups and planks and all kinds of stuff every day, and you lose 8 pounds, and you feel a little better. Your cardiovascular system's doing better. And then you end the program. So they sign you up for 4 to 6 weeks, whatever it is. Then you end the program. You go back to sitting on the couch, eating your chips, watching your movies, watching your Netflix, and you gain 10 pounds back. And then you reminisce about that time in your life when you lost 8 pounds running around the park and you felt better. So you go back and you spend some more money. You run around the park and you feel better. You lose 6 pounds of the 10 you gain back. And then the 4 weeks is over and you sit on your couch and you gain 12 pounds. And you reminisce about that time you ran around the park and you lost XYZ number of pounds. And you go back and you pay for another 4 weeks, and you keep doing this cycle over and over and over again. So then you decide, well, shoot, why don't I just not stop? Right. So this is where the overtraining comes in. Well, they're designed for you to stop after the 4 to 6 weeks, because everybody's a good trainer for 4 to 6 weeks. After that, then you start seeing the effects of overtraining. So then you do 2 in a row instead of sitting on your couch. And now your knees hurt. Now your back hurts. Now you can't sleep at night because that's one of the effects of overtraining. You've lost your appetite, or you start overeating. It actually goes in both directions. It's never in the middle. And so now you can't sleep. Now your body's breaking down, and now you can't control your appetite in one way or the other, which if it's less, then your body breaks down more. If it's too much, then you're starting to store fat, even though you're doing all this extra work. And so that's why I hate the boot camp model. It is designed to be temporary, and it is designed for you to remember that and come back and spend more money.
I thought of an example that might make a lot of sense to pretty much anyone who's gone through high school in America. Because even if you didn't play football, you knew people who played football. And there's a reason two-a-days only last, what, a couple weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they don't just keep.
There's two reasons. The first one is you can't maintain that.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you want to perform when you're playing. The second one is if you do training right, people, it's hard selling to the parents because they want their kid leaving super sweaty and dead every day. But in the off season, you actually, it's spinning your wheels to do too much conditioning, because conditioning is the fastest variable to train. I can make you more conditioned in 2 weeks than, focusing on it every year while losing everything else. So it goes against your strength and power training, and it's easy to do quickly. So I can work on all of those things and then do 2 weeks at the end of your program to make you conditioned, because it's that quick to train. So two-a-days are designed around that. Whether they knew it scientifically or not back when they started doing it, it doesn't matter. It was the intuition.
And I think part of the intuition too was kick your butt really fast to get you mentally and physically in some degree of shape really fast, so that we can spend our limited time, working our technique, supplementing with the weight room, but have time to work on our technique and work at a hard level, have a lot of volume and intensity, doing the things we need to do to win at this sport.
And that's where the sell to the parents models always kind of hold their kids back. Is we always talk about there's only trade-offs, right? And if I do conditioning, as we just talked about with rest and recovery, I have stimulated the nervous system, I have done muscle damage, and I have depleted energy. Well, I need those things. So I want to make, so I got a pitcher. Okay. So this is where a lot of my experience lies, right? Training the power pitcher. I want to increase his velocity from 95 miles an hour to 98 miles an hour by the next season. That doesn't sound like much to a lot of people, but that's the difference between, a $10 million contract versus league minimum, right? It's just like a 4.45 sprint versus a 4.35 sprint is getting drafted or not for some of these wide receivers, right? That's a tenth of a second. And it takes a lot of work to increase that. But if I'm doing conditioning every day, I'm taking away from those resources, which is neurological fatigue, energy, and muscle damage. I'm taking away from those when we just talked about, if I do a 1 rep max, I need about a week to recover. Well, in that recovery time, I'm doing all that other stuff. I'm not recovering. So it's a hard sell, but at the same time, you want to be able to focus on the variables that matter. And realistically, your pitcher goes out there, it's a pitch, 30 seconds, a pitch, 30 seconds, a pitch, 30 seconds. It's not just going out there and throwing the ball as fast as you can. So why am I going to put that guy on the battle rope, 4 times a week, and swinging kettlebells? And, those are all things I do in the preseason. But why am I going to do that when I'm trying to increase his overall ability to produce power and strength? It just doesn't, you're taking away from the resources you need. But again, yeah. So I guess we went on kind of a tangent there, but
yeah, we better wrap it up for real this time, or we'll go on for another 2 hours about this topic, or you will anyway.
That's what I do.
All right. Well, we're going to take a short break here, and then we're going to talk about things I don't want to talk about. All right. So you, because you're a jerk and you hate me, wanted to talk about the slap heard around the world.
Well, we've got to because everybody's talking about it. So maybe it'll
Uh,
give us clicks. I don't know. I'm still trying
well,
to figure out this algorithm because our
yeah.
first Leah Thompson video got hundreds of views, but the other three since then have gotten like maybe double digits tops. So trying to figure out the algorithm thing here. And we've got a friend that his wife just goes in and looks at model homes and posts a tour online, and she gets hundreds of thousands of views. So trying to figure this thing out. If people know better than us, let us know, because we're not the worst out there. We should at least get a few thousand out of the billions of people that are on this thing.
Well, it is annoying, it is dumb, but it is topical, and it actually, in a way, in a strange way, segues into what I did want to talk about.
Well,
Because
let's get the conspiracy. Which one segues better, the conspiratorial or the
well, you go ahead, because
behavior?
I'll give my point, and that'll be the segue is the thoughts I have on it.
Okay, so I want to get the conspiratorial out of the way because it's pissing me off. The facts on the ground are that this thing happened. Will Smith went up and slapped Chris Rock because he made a joke about his wife's hair, which she has alopecia. So, he's making fun of a medical condition. First of all, comedians don't have a medical record of everybody in the audience. Second, the comedic population out there is worried that this sets precedent because part of their job is heckling the audience. But at the same time, so we've got the facts on the ground. He made fun of her bald head in a very mild joke. And Will Smith went up and slapped him. And everybody's talking about alopecia. And Pfizer sponsored the Oscars, and Pfizer has an alopecia drug coming out. So I hate that all these things keep coming up and making us go, I wonder, because this may be nothing. It may be something. It's really good advertising if it was. And I hate that. Let's just push that aside now. Those are the facts on the ground. So let's go over the behavior then after that. First of all, why the hell was there not a security setup or stage hands or something that can go out there and be like, oh, somebody's about to assault somebody on stage?
Well, because it actually has happened before. People are like talking like this has never happened before. There have been a couple of instances, but in the kind of distant past, Marlon Brando was one. I don't remember the details. Like John Wayne was one, but these were like things that happened backstage.
Didn't Kanye
Someone
West
have to
like
be
go up and
restrained.
like,
That was it. The Grammys, I think, where he went up and interrupted Taylor Swift's acceptance speech because he's a lunatic. But I have to think that because there aren't normal people in the crowd, they just don't think something like this is going to happen because they're the good people. You know, that's the kind of thing you do when you're on stage. Like Chris Rock would have security, would have people, and they would be, antsy and on the lookout if he was on stage doing a performance, because you have who knows who in the audience, right? So I assume, and if you watch the video, which I didn't want to, but annoyingly I did, and see his face, at first he's kind of confused, and then it kind of looks like he's going to play along. I think he assumes that Will Smith is coming up there to, I don't know, ham it up, make fun of Rock, like do his own insults joke to stand up for his wife or whatever, defuse the situation. I really don't think he was expecting to be slapped when you look at his reaction. I think Will Smith is a good enough actor to play it the way he played it if he was acting. I don't think Chris Rock is a good enough actor to show the surprise and discomfort that he does when he gets slapped and then afterwards.
I don't know about that. I mean, he's been in some productions and he's done a good job. But realistically, I mean, I'm looking at this from and my wife always tells me, don't expect everybody to be like you, Sam. But, I'm trying to think from a practical standpoint. Someone's coming up to me aggressively, even if I only think they're going to ham it up. There's always that moment where you're just going to be like, hey, it was just a joke. You don't stand there with your hands behind your back and your face forward. It was almost like he was waiting for it, but yeah, that's golden rule number one. Keep your space, control your space, take a step back, put your hand up. But again, it's not up to Chris Rock too, because you said he was surprised. There should have been security there to prevent anything, even if it's some random person coming in the back door and rushing up the stage,
Well, that's what because that was my point, is all the security is going to be on the perimeter, looking out for all the normals to make sure no normies do anything. The good people are the ones in the auditorium, right? Especially up front. So the security is all going to be looking out instead of in. If this was like an actual stand-up performance by Chris Rock at a normal venue, they would be looking in and out, just to be safe. But I still think, I think he's in kind of a submissive posture, if you will, like, kind of ducking his head of, that was kind of harsh. I get you. And he's expecting a response, but he looks so confused afterwards. I really don't think he was expecting a physical response. And again, this is someone who lives in a bubble. So he hasn't had to deal with this. This is something that is kind of gross and infuriating, that the corporate media and the celebritocracy are all shocked and outraged at this. This isn't anything new for people on the right. So like, that was Crowder's reaction, is you don't let someone get that close. You always have your hands up. You always keep your space. You make sure you initiate contact if there's going to be contact, because he's had to deal with this. He only recently started going back on tour doing stand-up. Now that he's big enough, he can afford bigger venues with more security. He had to stop doing stand-up because he was doing it on college campuses where the left has gone insane and words are violence. And if you take that literally, if you take that seriously, okay, well,
that's the message coming out of this, is what Chris Rock said was more violent than the slap.
Yeah.
Is what the Voxes of the world and Vices. Oh, should we bring up that I sent you that that Babylon Bee.
God, that was,
do you have it on your computer?
No, I don't have it on my computer, but that was,
I only have it on my phone.
The bee wins again, because that was so spot on.
Yeah. For those that haven't seen it, where is my phone? There's my phone. I'll just read it off. So they did a headlines from all the major news outlets, and it was so spot on. Where's your message here? So Fox News, the headline is Oscars plagued by rise in black on black crime. Huffington Post, the patriarchal roots of slapping exposed. CNN, mostly peaceful Oscars threatens to distract from January 6th commission. OAN, if they hadn't stolen the election from Trump, this never would have happened.
Yeah, for anyone who doesn't know, that's One America News Network, and they're like
super
Trumpy.
right. Yeah,
uber Trumpy.
Yeah, we can't even call them conservative. They are Trumpers. They're their own category. Salon, white supremacy has gotten out of hand. Snopes, fact check, false. Will did not slap Chris. Chris's cheek struck the palm of Will's hand. Vox, rethinking the slap. Why getting slapped is actually a good thing. Daily Wire, which is also conservative, right?
I love this one. Yeah.
Will Smith destroys Chris Rock with this one simple gesture.
Because that's every headline of theirs.
Yeah. Cruz destroys AOC.
Yeah.
Teen Vogue, Will Smith's totally hot slap. How you can use it on your genderqueer partner in the bedroom. InfoWars, Alex Jones. Illuminati members stage fake slap to distract us all from. Wait, can I do an Alex Jones voice? Illuminati members stage fake slap to distract us all from implementation of the New World Order. Vice. I slapped myself 100 times and smoked crack to better understand the Black experience in America. I'm going to do The View last, even though it's third to last. Not the B. Check this out. Will Smith straight up pimp slap woke comedian Chris Rock, reminding us all how the last Jedi should have sucked. The B, the actual Babylon Bee. Will Smith is the Babylon Bee's Woman of the Year. But the best one, The View. Oh,
well, that actually leads into my segue, because the reason I wanted
I need to
but
smoke more before I do Alex Jones again.
the reason I wanted to but didn't want to talk about the Will Smith slap heard around the world is because I've seen a half dozen or more takes on this, and they're all right to some degree, and they're all wrong to some degree. But everyone who's issuing these takes are treating this as a binary.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Steve Dace, who I've mentioned before, he's really right. Capital R right, not lowercase. He's not always right, correct. Anyway, his take on this was that this was a good thing because the decline in masculinity is so pronounced these days that if this works as an example to show people, look, forget all the extraneous stuff. I'm paraphrasing him. Forget all the extraneous stuff about their weird relationship and what might be going on there. Social media has taught people that you can say whatever you want and there are not consequences.
Mm-hmm.
And men need to stand up for your wives. If somebody insults your wife, you slap them across the face. All right. There's an element of truth to that. Crowder, his take is that.
But we also got to separate an insult from a roast.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That and that's where Dace is partially right in his setup, in his premise, but then does it really apply to this situation? Which was Crowder's. It
also doesn't apply because Will Smith thought it was funny till he saw his wife's face.
Yep. Now we're getting to that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So if we're gonna get there, go ahead.
Okay. Going. So Crowder's point is that the court jester, comedians always have a get out of jail free card. Okay. The court jester was the one person who could say whatever he wanted to the king because somebody had to, right? The classic American example is Will Rogers, who was once he kind of hit it big and he was nervous because he was doing a performance and the president was going to be, I don't even remember who was president at the time, was going to be in the audience. And a lot of his jokes were about the president. Okay. But he did them anyway. And the president laughed because somebody has to do that. And you need those kind of guardians of the culture to keep us honest in the same way that, you know, people like Richard Pryor used the stage to poke us culturally, to point out our, you know, our hypocrisy and our failings when it came to racial issues. That's why he used a lot of racial comedy. And that's true to a degree, but you aren't immune to consequences just if you wear the label of comedy. So you can take that view too far as well.
Well, I mean, I think some of the best modern comedy right now, because of the environment where you can't make fun of anything, are actually the roasts where they would host Comedy Central roast on, you know, Dave Chappelle, Comedy Central roast. I mean, they were roasting Pamela Anderson on her hepatitis, you know, and she did the same bit when she roasted someone else pretty much. So those are, because they go in there knowing we're going to pick at your deepest, you know, wounds. We're going to pick the scab off your deepest wounds because that's part of the process.
And because it's cathartic.
Yeah. And people sign up for it, you know. if we look at this instance and we say, okay, so I'm a man, right? I need to stand up for my wife because maybe Chris Rock went too far. So let me put myself in Will Smith's body, and I think Chris Rock went too far. I see my wife's face, and I have confirmed in my belief that he went too far. What's the proper response to that? What is the manly response to that? And it's not to go up and bitch slap somebody. It's to say, hey, you went too far. And then if he keeps going, then you confront him physically. But what he was saying after he slapped him was what would have been appropriate before the slap. Keep her name out of your mouth. You said too much. She has a medical condition. David Spade tweeted in response to why would someone make fun of someone's medical condition? He said, because we don't have a health history of everybody in the audience, right? That's just how comedy works. You don't have a health history of everybody in the audience. So the proper response would have been to stand up for your wife if it was appropriate, but to walk up on stage and actually physically assault somebody is a little bit different. Now, I did watch Jocko Willink talk about this, and he had a very sober response to it. And he talked about his experience in the SEALs, and he said the slap was used to tell somebody they've gone too far without actually starting a fight. So if you were a SEAL and you had a disagreement and someone went too far, you slapped them. That was the, hey, you've gone too far kind of.
That's kind of the classic. You don't, they don't make them like they used to, 40s, 50s, where someone's being hysterical and you slap them to knock some sense into them. Mm-hmm. It's kind of that idea.
Yeah, exactly. And people would, now it opened the door. If someone responded with a fist, then it's a fight. Mm-hmm. And if you knowingly say something that is going too far, then you're inviting a fight. And if somebody slaps you, that's actually a courtesy at that point. But I doubt Will Smith has the same background as Jocko Willink. No. So it was I think it was inappropriate.
Yeah, and so I've seen tons of memes that are hilarious because it is kind of a funny moment in that a hallmark of comedy is the unexpected, and that was definitely unexpected. But I've also seen memes that are correct in that. So I saw one last night when I was scrolling through just to see what people were talking about, and it was Tay Diggs had a public breakdown because he hadn't seen his daughter for 2 years, and he became a meme. Kanye had a breakdown on TV because he's Kanye, and he became a meme. Will Smith had a breakdown live on TV, and he's become a meme. And people wonder why men don't talk about their mental health. And we've talked about this too, that mental health is a buzzword now, but people don't really mean it. And you can tell by their actions that when you look at Will Smith's reaction, a switch flipped so fast that this is switched so fast, and his reaction was so extreme, to your point, that a rational reaction would have been what he did after, which was shout up at him to keep my wife's name out your effing mouth, right? And then you slap if it goes too far. To me, this is showing someone who's had a very public breakdown that has been going on for a while. Mm-hmm. We mentioned, well, I guess this was before we started recording, about their open relationship. That's not really an open relationship.
And this is where it's kind of, this is why I really wanted to bring it up, because my Twitterverse is showing me exactly how not ready the American public is for actual open polyamorous relationships, because even the liberals on my Twitter feed are talking about how that's the problem here, that it's their marriage is a farce and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, no, she's overbearing on him is the problem. It's not that she is forcing that relationship on him. That's
she's mentally abusive.
Yeah. it has, if you're going to say, as Zuby said, who usually I like what he says, but he says an open relationship is a farce. That was his statement. And I'm like, well, that statement is only true if every relationship is 100% about sex.
Well, he's right with a slight tweak. Almost every relationship in almost every open relationship in practice, because I think in practice, when people say they want an open relationship, what they mean is I want to screw around and not have to deal with the consequences.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about, if anyone wants more on this, go back to our first Sexy Time with Sam when we talked about this, and you defined actual polyamory, which isn't what's happening here.
Mm-hmm.
From what I understand, what's happening here is that Jada Pinkett Smith screwed around with multiple guys,
with a rapper who made a song about it,
and then post hoc said, well, we're in an open relationship, to justify her cheating around. And post hoc said, well, I've never believed in traditional marriage.
And then him, just to save face, kind of went along with it.
And this is where he is legitimately an abused spouse. But you're not, again, we want to say the buzzword.
Well, again, we're assuming he's not
it.
doing the same thing too. So that's also part of it. We don't know that.
But he certainly looks to be someone, and in this case here, is certainly acting like someone who is not in a right frame of mind.
Mm-hmm.
So there's,
well, and so this is kind of bringing in another argument about it. There's people talking about, well, whether it was faked or it was real, and one of the anti-fake arguments is, why would Will Smith do that to his reputation? It's actually good for his reputation, because his reputation for the last several years is as a simp.
Mm-hmm.
To actually go up there and physically assault somebody who made fun of his wife gives him a little street cred. He's got that tough guy persona again, to some degree, instead of just being his wife's little bitch.
Except that I think it makes it worse, because
again, he laughed first and then saw her face.
Yeah, he's laughing. It's it kind of looks to me like it's kind of the eye rolling laughter of, all right, yeah, you got me, that was funny, but it also wasn't right. But then he looks at his wife, and her face makes him turn on a dime. Mm-hmm. And that to me is just not a rational response. That is not someone who's in his right mind. And so well, we could go on and on about this, but I wanted to actually segue into what I had originally wanted to talk about today, which is environmentalism. And
they're connected.
Yes, they're connected. But really, here's why. Like I said, I've seen half a dozen takes on this, and they're all right to some degree, and they're all wrong to some degree. But everyone presenting these takes is presenting them as a binary, implicitly or sometimes explicitly. The title on Dace's podcast where he talked about this was stupid, clickbaity, that it was something like, your take on the Will Smith slap is wrong. Okay, well, no, you can say that there's more to it, or I have a different take or different spin or whatever, which he did, because I hadn't heard anyone else talk about it in that way. But Crowder also isn't wrong to say, it shouldn't be open season on comedians. And the people making fun of it are also right in that, all right, this is kind of funny, but the people pointing out, why are we all laughing at this when this is someone having a mental breakdown live on TV and we're supposed to care about mental health? That is also true. And
I don't like that one because of his apology afterwards, blaming everybody but himself. But
well, the point being, environmentalism is something that has long been a binary. It is this is the science. This was the science before the modern the science, which is another reason I want to talk about it. And it has been presented as incontrovertible fact, and there is only one narrative. So as we've pointed out, there are lots of facts about, well, let's just say COVID and everything around it. There are lots of facts about it. You can interpret those facts in different ways, some more reasonable than others. So there isn't just one set of incontrovertible facts. There's one incontrovertible narrative that is acceptable. That's different. That's the science instead of actual science. And that's where the problem of environmentalism and our response to it, our action on it, is so problematic, is that there is no nuance, there is no critical thinking. And it matters because this is the E in the ESG score. That the people pushing this idea of ESG, this idea of social credit scores, are really pushing an agenda. And I meant to pull this up and I forgot to. Maybe you can find it real quick.
Well, let me go on the subject of grooming. We talked about grooming with the children. We as a public are being groomed. So the goal of the WEF, which is the people behind the ESG scores realistically, is to have to go from a shareholder capitalist system to a stakeholder capitalist system, which is the stakeholder capitalist system is the experts on top control the economic environment, not the people who are actually benefiting or getting the negative effects of what's happening there. And so look at the headlines, right? Look at what happened with Fauci in the last several years. Look at what the headlines say, expert says. Well, who's the stakeholder that's going to determine these things? Expert says. Fauci's the stakeholder. We want to do this for public health. Your business is doing the opposite. You have to change, right? Same thing with the environment. Experts say world's going to end in 10 years if we don't shut down the Keystone pipeline. Keystone pipeline gets shut down, right? Expert says this, expert says that. And we're being groomed because those are the headlines.
Yeah.
Going through and we're getting put into an environment where we are going to listen to the experts, who are the people who are responsible for that. So expert says inflation is not due to these decisions we made. It's due to, Putin, right? So even though it doesn't take a whole lot of math skills to determine that it was happening before that, right? And we're kind of being groomed as a public to defer everything to expert says.
Yeah. And we are being groomed to be a nation of Karens, because I'm glad you brought up stakeholder versus shareholder capitalism. Let's put that in air quotes, because a major component to that is the idea that we all have a say in what you do because it affects us. It's that annoying jerk in the HOA who's going around measuring people's grass because, well,
we have that jerk.
Yeah, because the tiniest violation of the HOA rules, well, that affects my property value. Screw you and let me live my life. Okay. So the environmentalism example is we all have a stake in what Exxon does because their business affects the environment. So even though we don't have a share in their business, we haven't put down capital, we haven't bought shares in their business, we can still tell them what to do because it affects us. So even though you brought up the Keystone Pipeline, hundreds of millions of dollars were invested by other people, not us, to build that pipeline. And then we said, no, screw you. And this is why I hate HOAs. Yeah, that's why I use it as an example. So, and to your point, the people ultimately making that decision are technocrats, are our betters, are these people who they know they're the smart ones in the room. They're the ones that can push the buttons and pull the levers and make everything beautiful and work out perfectly.
And who also know what they're going to do ahead of time so they can invest in everything they're pushing along. But there's
that's part of the thinking critically of environmentalism. Al Gore is the high prophet of environmentalism, and it's not an accident that he has never held a real job in his life outside of government until he got out of government, and then magically he was on all these boards. He's like, he was on the board of Apple. Why? How? Because he claimed to invent the internet? I don't know. But he's the high prophet of environmentalism, and that's why he's on all these boards, is because it gives him cover, and because he can use his connections and the policy of environmentalism to be invested in solar panel companies and all these other things that are going to get free money from the government. And now Al Gore is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And even though he keeps claiming we're doomed and the ocean levels are going to rise, he owns a beachfront house in Malibu.
Well, he also is already a decade off in his prediction. What his prediction right in line with the Mayan calendar of 2012?
Yeah, kind of more or less. Yeah.
No.
It was one of those things. But here's I have some specific examples like that, but I wanted to kind of talk more generally at first. That how much time do you have, by the way?
Actually, my noon client is out. He has the commie cough.
Oh no.
Yeah.
What? That still exists? I thought the only problem in the world was Ukraine. I digress. So I was big into environmentalism as a lad. It was the one not really conservative capital C thing about me as I started to get into politics, because I'm a big nature lover. I always have been. I'm much more comfortable and enjoy myself much more, hiking or skiing or hunting or something like that than being here in the burbs. So
you and me both. I'm here for my son's education. I would much rather be outside of this.
Yeah. And the first and natural ecologists were farmers and hunters and people and just nature lovers. So I was big into it, and also because I bought into a lot of the scaremongering without ever thinking critically. And Rush Limbaugh was actually one of the ones that kind of first cracked this by posing a simple question that, again, that's the first stage of thinking critically, the Socratian method of just asking questions. So one of the talking points of early environmentalism when we were lads was the rainforest. The rainforests were the lungs of the world, and we were destroying it. And you would hear these insane statistics like every second or every 3 seconds, a whole football field of the rainforest is destroyed. And Limbaugh simply asked the question, how would we do that? Just practically speaking, are we bombing the rainforest? Because that's what it would take to level that much rainforest that quickly. There aren't enough people in Brazil to do what this statistic says is happening. And so it was the first kind of crack to get me to think critically of, well, if this is wrong, what else is wrong? If this is wrong, why is it wrong? Well, because it sounds horrific. You show all these pictures of all these pretty animals in the rainforest, and then say we're, X number of species are being destroyed every day, and this amount of rainforest is being destroyed every second, and it's scary. And so when you scare people, they don't think. And that's the point.
We can go down a lot of lines with this, because remember I brought up the domestic violence numbers. Every 9 seconds, a woman is beaten by her husband or whatever. And I'm like, every 9 seconds in a year, that's a lot. And so I did the math, and it was only about 2.5 million off, even if you multiply the reported by like 5. So it sounds, go back to our theme. Is it getting a limbic response, or is it getting a cognitive response? And if you never check the math, you're always subject to that limbic response. And the limbic response, even if you believe in free will, is not free will. Even if you are a free will person, your limbic system is not your will. It is your reaction to your environment. And if you're only subject to that, then you have no mind of your own. And a football field, a forest every day stimulates that limbic response. Whereas, wow, how many people does it take to do that? And how long would that even be sustainable? We would know that by now, right? Because that was what, the 90s?
80s is when I first heard
Yeah,
that
so
stuff.
we're about, well, we're children of the 80s, so 40 years out.
Mhm.
How, a day, football field a day, we can do the math, right? 100 yards by what, 40 yards?
No, it was like a football field, seconds or minutes.
No.
So it's just an absurd and astounding part. And
so we've got 4,000 square yards per whatever. Let's call it a day. 365 per year times 40 years. That is 58,400,000 square yards a day, if it's just per day. Now, what is that per mile? How many yards in a mile? 1,600 approximately. 1,600. So 36,000 square miles a day since then. How big is 36,000 square miles?
What was that? Was just 365. So that was just in a year.
That was just if we're doing a year. So
and there's only 2
square root of, so that's 200 miles by 200 miles.
And there's only 2.3 million square miles, according to Britannica, in the Amazon rainforest as a whole. And remember, I was hearing this stuff back in the 80s, 40 years ago. Yeah. So, you'd be able to see the bare spots from space.
Yeah.
If that was the case. And in actuality, there is more forest land today than there was in colonial times, because we have, firefighting and fire prevention methods. We don't need as much lumber as we did because we use plastics and metals so much.
And we talk about the global warming, carbon and emissions and everything. Guess what loves carbon? Plants. So there's actually more green in the world right now than there was 30 years ago. And yes, part of that's man-made because we are emitting carbon. And yes, there is some warming, but plants love that shit. They don't like cold and they love carbon.
There are no solutions, only trade-offs, and there is nuance. Yeah, there are problems with factory farming, but you know what factory farming has going for it? Efficiency. So another reason there's more forest is because we can plant them for harvest. This is something that kind of just dawned on me. I don't remember, a while back when I was talking to someone about environmentalism, and they mentioned deforestation in the same idea of depletion of resources. Hold on a second. Trees aren't a resource, they're a crop. That's like saying every time we harvest corn, we're depleting the earth's natural resources.
Well, you got a time element in that. Yeah, you got a time element in that, though.
Sure.
If you're depleting faster than you can grow, corn grows basically overnight. That shit grows fast.
But that was my point about the factory farming, is that one of the benefits is efficiency. Is tree farms have this timed out and planned out. I've been to tree farms in East Texas. In Lufkin, there's a huge paper mill, and they farm the trees that they put into their paper mill. And they have, they showed us a number of different plots of, segregated out of, this is in this stage, this stage, this stage. And, here we have a few months away from harvest. So the point being, just by thinking a smidge critically, you realize that the fear mongering is in fact fear mongering, because it's not that dire, and we are actually doing things about it. And this is where I'm going to get into a specific example. Overpopulation. How often do you hear people talking about the dire effects of overpopulation?
I've got queued up on my YouTube Coleman Hughes interviewing somebody about that, and I haven't watched it yet, but you hear it a lot.
A lot.
Well, okay. Wasn't there a graphic going around though that if you took everybody on the planet and piled them up, that they don't even fill up the Grand Canyon?
Mhm.
It was
All
like a
right.
small section of it.
Actually, let's jump into that. So I was actually looking for something else here, and I found this interesting little infographic. Share this. Okay. So population density. So here you have a basic chart of population density. Darker colors, more dense. All right. So this was 2013. So this is a little while ago. There is now more than 7.1 billion people on the earth, but we'll get to that.
I think it's like 7.6 billion right
All
now.
right. If everyone lived as densely as they do in Manila, the city of Manila, the human race could fit in Tunisia. The entire human race in 2013, 7.1 million people in Tunisia living. Okay, so all you're talking about here
So it's
is
not shoulder to shoulder. It's actually going
no,
through life. Yeah.
it's one mega city. It's the Judge Dredd mega cities
Mhm.
that is the size of a country, but you're only as densely packed as, and yeah, for a lot of us that would suck and be uncomfortable. But the point here is we have so much more room than people think we do. If everyone lived as densely as they do in Manhattan, you could fit the entire human race in New Zealand. Mumbai, you could fit in Germany. If everyone lived as densely as they do in Bangladesh, the human race could fit in Australia. Okay. South Korea, New Jersey density, you could fit the entire human race in Russia. So we have so much room. And now, just by definition, most people live in cities. Most people live in urban areas. So if you're not going to think critically, you're just going to think in your own bubble. So if people start talking about overpopulation, you're going to look around and go, yeah, heck, even here in the burbs, you're going to look around and go, my gosh, look at all the new housing areas constantly going up, especially here in Texas, which is growing rapidly. Okay. These are people who've never been on a road trip. So you've been out skiing in New Mexico. Did y'all drive out there?
Yes.
There is so much nothing on that drive out to,
Well, and I was thinking
mountains of New
about it too,
Mexico.
because the big thing out there is water, right? It's not the biggest resource depletion in that area is water. And what we know about vegetation and temperature is you screw Keystone Pipeline. If we had water pipelines that went out there and basically created tree farms with those water pipelines, you would lower that local temperature area by 3 or 4 degrees just because it's green, right? And you could see that when you go to like the Grand Canyon. So you're down in the desert and then you drive up the mountain and you get into a green area and there's snow, but there's no snow in the other area because it's hotter where there's no trees. And so you can see that local temperature change just by going into the green. And I don't know what it would do because trade-offs, right? What it would do to the local plant life, like the saguaro cactus and the local wildlife, but we could partially affect global warming by making these desert areas green with pipelines. But again, it's about trade-offs. There's no what would that do to the environment as a whole? Would we start more hurricanes? Maybe. I don't know. Would we have more tornadoes? Maybe. I don't know. Would that affect the local plant life and wildlife? Definitely. Right. And that's why this is a complicated topic, because there are some easy answers to local stuff, but it would be either beneficial or detrimental down the road. Well, it'd be detrimental to something because things adapted to their local. But yeah, to your point, yes, there's a lot of space with no people.
And there are a lot of solutions that people don't think about. So I have a more astounding stat. This is what I was actually looking for when I found those infographics. All right. There are 735 square miles on the island of Maui, according to the Hawaii government website. All right. So let's turn that into square feet and we get a really big number. 204,906 624,000. My calculator can't go that high. Okay. Now let's. Seriously, I ran out of room on my phone calculator. Okay.
What was it? What was the number?
204.
No. What is the
6.
what was the square miles?
24000. It's 735 square miles. All right, so I've got it into square feet.
Times 5,280.
And you've got 20 billion square feet. Okay. So now let's just say 2. Divide by 2. All right. Because on average, you're going to have bigger people and smaller people, but I think that's a fair number to say that if
we're all working on being Tess Holiday, so
yeah, if a human being, yeah, but consider that's a first world problem, and they don't look like that in India anyway.
True,
because this is what I'm getting at here. A human being standing upright, let's say 2 square feet of room. That means you could fit 10 billion people on the island of Maui if we were all just standing up shoulder to shoulder having a monster rave. The UN has estimated that by 2050, the world population is going to be 9.5 billion. So that's why I bring this up, because they bring this up to show how overpopulated we are and how dangerous the future is going to be. So we must take radical measures now. You would still have a little room to spare for those extra fatties if you just piled everyone on the island of Maui in 2050.
Well, it's not just the room though, it's the resources.
Yes, this is true. And I'm glad you brought that up, because here's my next share.
Well, I was gonna share this real quick as I brought it up. This is what I was talking about. If you piled the world population into the Grand Canyon, that's what it would look like. The Grand Canyon's big.
Yes, it is.
And I'm still amazed only about 12 people die a year and only 4 people from falling because of how stupid people are.
This is something that's so infuriating to me about some of these arguments we've been having. This goes back to 1968, and I'm purposely using a stupidly biased source here. Wikipedia. All right, so back in 1968, this guy named Paul Ehrlich wrote a book called The Population Bomb, which was a massive scaremongering book about how we're all going to die and run out of resources. And it had these dire predictions of massive famines and huge wars over resources. And I think he set it out like 20, 30 years in the future. He was predicting that the rapidly expanding world population was going to be such a drain on resources that it was going to destroy the world, basically. All right. Well, a business professor, Julian Simon, made a wager, a public wager with Ehrlich that said, pick, I think it was 10, pick the resources that you want to judge by, because you're talking about resource scarcity. Fine. Ehrlich and his colleagues picked 5 metals that they thought would undergo big price increases, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So they have these 5 resources, and this business professor said, there will be more and it will be cheaper. And he was right on every single one, because scarcity brings innovation, not disaster. Okay. So when you hear, like, for instance, when you hear we have, only 30 more years of oil left, well, that means first of all, known reserves. How many reserves do we not know about? We keep finding stuff. Known reserves at current market prices, at current levels of technology. Okay. One of the big, fracking is not new. What is new are some of the techniques that have come about in the last 10 years, because
Mhm.
we've known that these oil sands exist and we've had fracking technology. We just haven't been able to use it to extract the oil and the natural gas, which is more important in fracking. We haven't been able to use it to extract. So whenever you would hear these numbers, it didn't include all those oil sands. Well, when we started doing that, oil dropped and American production skyrocketed. So that is the scaremongering of this overpopulation idea that is central to a lot of modern environmentalism scaremongering. And it was debunked, and I've complained about the use of that word, but in this instance, it's accurate to say debunked half a century ago. And yet, we're still talking about it. We're still using that scaremongering idea.
You will eat bugs, you will have your pod, and you will own nothing. Which realistically, I'm not opposed to the eating bugs thing. In addition to my steak, as long as we can get those Louisiana, the Baton Rouge boys to get together and learn how to cook them like mud bugs, I'll eat bugs all day if they can do that. Because, I mean, it's similar. You got the cockroach of the bayou, and they make them delicious. So if you can do that, I'll eat bugs. I mean, they're high in protein, low in fat. So let's do it.
So did you have any thoughts on that before I move on to my next example?
Well, I have on my bookmark saved up. We talked about a certain person that was censored. But we did this all as one. We did this all as one video, so I don't want to get us banned. Let me at least bring up one of those, because this is actually on the NASA website. Where did I
But that matters, since our banned video used only CDC resources.
Yeah, true. Here we go. Earth data. This is the right one. earthdata.nasa.gov. Okay, yeah, so this is the right one. So there is a certain person that Heath held up his book that Google decided to demonetize and everywhere. It's not taken down, but he can't make any money, which you need money to do science, especially when you're working with satellites, because that's expensive. But this is a little piece on him and versus the other sensory organizations that are out there, because he uses satellite
and weather balloons. He uses a lot of weather balloon data.
Yeah, satellite data and weather balloons to do the average temperature on the planet, and everyone else has positioned thermometers around the world.
He's taking atmospheric readings. They're taking land readings via thermometers.
And so basically this article here in earthdata.nasa.gov is talking about the discrepancy between the two, and how they should take a kind of a maybe it's something in between stance, and what could be responsible for that. And one of his major points is his is more encompassing. So when you have the gauges around the world, they typically are next to population centers. And the rebuttal is, well, it's not just urban, it's rural as well. But what we know from at least the way we farm here in the States is you raise local temperatures by the way you plow and use fertilizers as well. So he's talking about the fact that you're not right in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, or you're not right in the middle of Antarctica. In fact, I think I have a graphic of one of those. I think it's this one.
Well, while you're pulling that up, it's actually worse than that. This is something that has been known for a long time. There have been people who have gone out and found thermometers right next to AC units. And so the thermometer is showing that the local temperature is 150 degrees. and they don't throw that number out. Which, if you were doing real science, you would take outliers and throw them out. You would also figure out why it's an outlier. Oh, because this thermometer is right behind an AC unit getting hot air blasted on it. So we should probably move this.
Yeah. And so what I was, did you get the graphic I brought up that went through the timeline?
Yep.
So as you can see, the global temperature changes.
4 degrees of Fahrenheit is what we're looking at here.
Yeah. And there's a couple of patterns here.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, overall we get a little bit of an increase. So global warming exists. Just to get that disclaimer out of it, global warming exists. And yes, some of it is due to our interference with the environment. So those two things are facts. The question is, what's the degree and what's the impact, right? Now, what I want to point out here is look at where the most is. Up here in the north, like, so we hear about glaciers melting and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What they're not showing on this map is, I had another one and I'm going to look for it while you're talking here in a minute, where it was actually cooling over Antarctica versus, so it's almost like it's moved north versus just increased overall. And then the other one, is there a timestamp on there? Because I got cameras covering 1915. There we go. Okay. 1900. I just kind of was looking through stuff and I noticed some things. 1900, the Gulf is super cool. Does anybody want to know why Galveston isn't the hub of East Texas versus Houston? It's because in that time, Galveston got blown away by probably one of the biggest hurricanes ever recorded in U.S. history.
Pretty literally blown away. Yeah.
No, yeah, it was destroyed, completely destroyed. It's the most damaging hurricane ever to have existed on this continent in 1900, and the Gulf was cool. Everybody talking about hurricanes getting worse, hurricanes getting worse. No, we had one bad year with a lot of them, but anytime you have a bad year, you can say it's getting worse, right? We go back 100 and some odd years ago, and you had the actual worst, and it changed the course of a whole section of the country, because Houston is the fourth biggest city in the country, and it should have been Galveston, except they realized, oh, maybe we need to pull back from the coast a little bit and use those bayous and dredge them out so we can get the ships in.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, dredge them out, use the bayous, use the protected bay instead of being right on the coast, and getting whacked. I had a thought and I lost it. Oh, your showing of the adjustment and it's actually getting cooler in the Antarctic. And you remember when we were kids and everyone was freaking out about the hole in the ozone layer? And then that went away and nobody talked about it anymore. You wonder why? Because it shrunk. And then it grew again, and then it shrunk. Because the atmosphere is a dynamic system. It is not a static system. And that is one of the many key problems in the environmentalism fear-mongering, is the way they present the argument is like the environment is a static system. All right, if you're freaking out about the warming, then what's the ideal temperature? Well, there's not one, because we've gone up and down a lot lately. Okay, so what temperature should we be? And then if you get someone to actually answer that question, they'll talk about the rise in the rate of global warming. Okay, well, this brings me to my next example.
Wait, I found the graphic I was talking about real quick. So this is also from NASA. Oh no, this is something else. But yeah, so you see that this shows where they actually have the temperature gauges. And you notice the gray, they're not even reading some of these areas, but yet they're reporting that there's change across that.
That is the criticism from people doing the atmospheric readings about the thermometers is you're measuring local temperatures and you're taking that aggregate data and saying this applies to the entirety of the world.
Yeah, we're not even reading most of Africa.
That is why I spent that time on the idea of overpopulation. The world is really freaking big, and people, I think, don't really comprehend the size of it.
It's almost like cherry picking data.
Almost like. Speaking of cherry picking data, again, I'm using a bias source on purpose. How many people remember that this happened? The global warming pause or slowdown or hiatus. And I'm purposely using, so Wikipedia claims neutrality. This isn't even remotely neutral. It's not even trying to be neutral. Okay. There was a pause in global, there was no global warming. There was no average temperature rise from 1998 to 2013. That was a big effing deal. And then people just try to explain it away. Now, here you'll see on the right here where this totally neutral Wikipedia article says, well, yes, but the trend line is still going up. There was this pause here, but then if you zoom back to 1880, well, hold on a second. You're doing what you're criticizing. I mean, look at the beginning of that graph. What was going on before that? Because you have a trend line that's kind of flat before it starts spiking up around 1900. So where is your data coming from? And what does it look like before?
Well, they're using those dates on purpose because now we're introducing combustion engines.
Yes.
To the world.
So they're saying, well, see, there's this large spike here. Well, if you go back before, you can find areas in time where using ice core samples, you can extrapolate the global mean temperature, and you can see that it has been hotter. It has also risen faster than it is now, risen more steeply than it is now, way before people were having an impact on it. So here's the big point about the global warming pause that they tried to explain away and didn't discuss, and that is in this book here is, all right, so I'm gonna read a section from this book. This is page, I'm gonna start on page 68 here and read a longish paragraph. You see, a temperature change can be caused either by a weak forcing that is being amplified by positive feedback, or by a strong forcing that is being reduced by negative feedback. Therefore, as one approaches a zero forcing, you need to have very strong positive feedback to cause an observed temperature change. Because of this issue, most methods of diagnosing feedbacks are prone to giving the illusion of a sensitive climate system. This is because we see evidence of a temperature change, but often do not know what caused it. This is just one step away from assuming that it must have been caused by some tiny forcing being amplified by positive feedback. And just like some ancient tribe of people who made sacrifices to the gods of nature to ward off severe weather, our lack of understanding of the natural forcings that cause temperature changes of the past leads us to blame our sinful use of fossil fuels instead. The point of the pause is what the good professor was talking about there, and what he expounds on a lot in this book, is that the fear mongering of global warming comes from models that assume that a small input will be expanded by positive feedback loops. So their argument is that even if you get them to admit how minuscule an impact the human race is on the vastness of the world, well, yes, but those combustion engines weren't there before, and therefore this small input is throwing the whole system out of whack. All of their models assume a sensitive, as he puts it, a sensitive climate system. He lays out using atmospheric temperature readings, and he gives the math in there, which, is hard to follow. And I was annoyed that I had trouble following the math, but he's good at explaining the math. But it's there if you want to check his work. That no, we actually have a very robust climate system that mitigates these extreme forces to create a more stable trend line. And all of the models predicting disaster are assuming a sensitive system. Well, if your model is accurate, you should be able to predict things. None of the models being used by things like the UN climate panel predicted the hiatus. That was the point of it. No. You gotta look back. It's not that big a deal. It was a short time. It was only like a 15-ish year period. And we look at 30-year periods. Okay, well, you're ignoring the main point, which is all of your fear mongering and policy are based on models that did not predict this.
Remember we talked about models before?
Mm-hmm.
In the racial debate, where this little blip was used to make a statement about how many minorities would be incarcerated. Models.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is all the fear mongering is around models.
Mm-hmm.
If they had the actual data to support it, we would be dead at this point, because the world would have ended a long time ago.
It's actually worse than that too, because I don't remember if the good professor mentions it in this book or not, but he's talked about this and others have talked about the models are so bad, you can't use them to show past results. If you have a mathematical model that you're saying is going to be predictive, you should be able to check your work. In the same way that if you're solving for X, you've got the answer right. If you go back to that original equation, input 2 for X, and then, okay, do I get the answer? If you don't, you did something wrong. Well, you can take the models they're using for fear mongering, go back to historical data, and they can't be used to show that. So like, you should be able to take this model and say, okay, well, we should be able to use this model to show the mean temperatures between 1930 and 1960, and they can't.
So many subjects we've talked about where this is the same pattern, whether it's diseases we're not going to mention, whether it's the racial issues, whether it's the climate science. It's almost like there's a pattern here. And all roads lead to more control and more separation between the elites and us normal people as well. So
it's curious, isn't it, that all of these crises and disasters all have the same solution, which is more power and control for a select few individuals and groups.
The good guys.
Mm-hmm.
The good guys, because they've got our back.
It's almost like some of these people don't care about the issues they say they care about, and instead they're just using them for ulterior motives. As you said, there's a reason why they always play on crises, because they want to short circuit your logical thinking.
Well, it's the rules for radicals. Don't let a good crisis go to waste. A good example is this "Don't Say Gay" bill.
Mm-hmm.
Is you're attacking the LGBTQ plus community if you are for it, but no, they're actually standing behind the wall of the LGBTQ community to throw their grenades. Mm-hmm. They're using someone else to take the arrows so they can keep throwing their grenades and destroy everything. Same with the climate, and same with everything else. So, but yeah, all roads seem to end up in the same place. Give me more power.
Yes. Socking back to when we kind of open this up and you talk about the World Economic Forum and their plans and what they want to do and the idea of stakeholder capitalism, we have scared the crap out of you since you were a kid watching Captain Planet about the world is going to end. So let us run things. Let us decide not just environmental policy when it comes to business, but let us have a more direct hand in what these businesses are doing, even though we aren't actually a part of that business or even that industry.
Mhm. This is one of my motivations for, again, the words have been butchered lately, but progressives, right? Progressives want progress, root word, right? The problem is they keep riding the same horses till they die. And when realistically, I would like that to shift to, let's solve a problem, which we did like with something like gay rights or something along that arena, so we can move on to the next one. Why do we keep fighting about abortion? We can put that to bed. Now let's go to climate. Climate is probably the biggest one on the table right now because we all have to live in this world together. But it's not a binary, like you said. But there are things that can be done. So let's go ahead and get on that, and let's find a reasonable plan to sustain things, and then move on to the next thing, and then move on to the next thing. Progress is a incremental process. When I train and someone comes in with jacked up hips, I want to solve those hips so I can move on to the next thing. I don't want to constantly for years be working on that person's hip, right? So I want things to be solved. It's not going to make everybody happy. It's not going to be perfect, but to a degree where we can move on to the next thing.
I'm glad you brought that up because that was something I thought about after we were done last time, because it kind of just hit me and I said, I should have mentioned this, but and it wasn't necessary at the time, or wasn't appropriate at the time, but I think it is here. So here's the problem with your point, your analysis of progressives is the reason that has happened is because there is a difference, as there often is, between the movement and the leaders of the movement. So the progressive movement came about, if you go back and you look at its roots, it came about by people who were technocratic authoritarians, and they cloaked their desires in this idea of progress. We're going to make progress. But what they really meant is, we want to do the things we want to do with no constraints. So, and you can see the weirdness of this if you consider two of the leaders of the progressive movement in the early 1900s, Teddy Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson. Very different characters, but yet they both had the same idea of using the power of government to help our society progress, to help individuals and groups progress and the society as a whole. And they went about it in very different ways. And the reason it was ultimately such a destructive movement was frankly because of Woodrow Wilson, our worst president ever. This is someone who you can go back and read his own words. He was a history professor at Princeton. He was an avid racist who openly despised the Constitution. He despised the idea that a document could constrain people like him, because he was an arrogant prick who knew better than everyone else. And so he didn't want to be constrained by anything. He wanted to do what needed to be done to progress. But again, keep in mind, there are lots of things to like about Teddy Roosevelt, who was a leader in the progressive movement. But Wilson's idea of progress was to roll back the integration that had slowly been happening since the end of the Civil War. He was one of the leaders of the Lost Cause, capital L, capital C. If you look up the Lost Cause movement, this was this idea that the Confederacy was noble in their pursuits, and they had a noble lost cause, and that it was, Northern aggression that was brutalized the South. It was in a lot of ways the same thing Nazism did to World War I about the stab in the back idea. So Wilson started that. The Klan was on its last legs. Wilson revived it. Because that was his idea of progress. That was his idea of, this is what needs to be done to progress us as a society, and I'm not going to be constrained by anything when I push this.
Well, we can bring that to modern times, because purpose is a huge thing. We've talked about that. Purpose is what drives us. And if your problem is solved and you've narrowly defined your purpose, what is there to life at this point? So someone like Ibram X. Kendi, right? His purpose is this racial injustice that he is perceived in the world, right? So if we come to a consensus on what is actually the problems and how to fix them, and we go in that direction as a nation, he has lost everything about his life. I mean, he could take his 10 million and retire, but he's what, our age, about 40 years old. He can take his money, but he lost his purpose, and he has narrowly defined his purpose. Greta Thunberg is a teenage girl that has defined her purpose in this world. She cannot have it be solved because she loses that. She can be a millionaire for the rest of her life, but at the same time, she has lost her space in the world. And this is slightly a narcissistic personality associated with that as well, because they need that attention from that purpose. But yeah, these people that narrowly define themselves, the Jesse Jacksons of the world, the Al Sharptons, they couldn't have it solved, because then they would lose their place in life. And realistically, us growing up and alongside that Al Sharpton Jackson era, did you ever think it was going to get worse than that? And it has gotten so much worse. They're actually reasonable figures at this point when you really look back. But yeah, you go way back in history with the Wilson example, but look at the modern examples. They have to keep this perpetuating, because otherwise they have nothing except money. And we all know that that's cool and all, but
that it just makes them want more.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that was a depressing way to end it, but it doesn't have to be, if you, as we've been harping on, don't let fear mongering and crises short circuit your rational thinking, because that's how, and always be wary of people in power trying to sell you something.
Well, and emotion motivates, but then you've got to take a step back and make sure your motivation is directed in the proper direction. And so it's a combination of both. There is no lack of emotion, but there's also no, you have to think through things. So let the emotion kind of push you in the right direction, and then make sure you stay on a good path using your brain. It's like getting married, right? If you meet some girl out on a night out and everything clicks that night, you don't propose to her that same day, right? You still let it play out and let all those emotional triggers kind of subside a little bit before you actually make the decision for the rest of your life. It's treat everything like that. And I think we would be a little bit healthier.
So that's what we've been ending on, is go make yourself, your community healthier.
Yeah, make yourself, your community healthier, and it will trickle up. That's the thing about good ideas versus bad ideas. If you notice, bad ideas have to be forced from the top down. Good ideas, if something comes from the bottom up, it's almost always a good idea, because it's natural and it's actually what's best for the people involved.
And because it's had time to push back. It's had time to, figure out the kinks and the problems and the idea, because you've had, a lot of different people taking a bite at it and refining it.
Yeah, Lysenko was only possible because Stalin endorsed it. The farmers themselves were doing the right thing already, creating food in the proper manner.
Mhm.
And Stalin liked a scientist that was whacked out of his mind, and he
Mhm.
ruined everything. But it had to be a top-down movement. The bottom up, the farmers that have been doing it forever, even though they lack the science we have now, were doing the right thing. They didn't want to change. That's why they were killed. They didn't want to change because they knew what was right.
Yep.
Bottom up movements tend to have that intuition.
Yep. 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 All
So
right.
if you're one of our 12 viewers, let's keep pushing from the bottom up.
Yeah. Push on the bottom.
Push on the bottom. Yeah, hit that prostate. Did I
We'll
cross the
see.
line there?
We'll see y'all next time on that note.
All right.